On the morning of his highly publicized wedding, billionaire Ethan Donovan was stopped at the steps of St. Andrew's Church by a homeless girl who looked terrified. "Don't marry her," she pleaded, gripping his sleeve. And then she whispered two words only his fiancée and her lawyer should have known: mirror clause. In that moment, Ethan realized his perfect wedding might be a perfectly crafted trap. That morning the sun had barely risen over Santa Monica when the first news vans pulled up outside St. Andrew's Church. The early light bounced off their satellite dishes, turning the quiet residential street into something that looked more like a film set than a place of worship. Even the ocean breeze carried a strange electricity, the kind that usually surrounds celebrity scandals or political drama. But today it was a wedding, the wedding everyone in California seemed to be watching. Ethan Donovan's name was already trending on social media before 7 a.m. Tagged in photos of floral arches, designer suits, and the glittering white steps leading up to the church doors. It wasn't a wedding, people joked online, and it was a premiere. And in a way it was. Ethan Donovan wasn't just another rich guy from the West Coast, he was the youngest billionaire to come out of the tech boom. A philanthropist with a foundation that supported youth programs, mental health shelters, and dozens of community initiatives. The media loved him because he made good headlines, and people loved him because he didn't act like he was better than them. Even when he attended fundraisers packed with CEOs and politicians, he had a grounded air about him. Something that made strangers feel like they knew him. Today was supposed to be the final touch on his public image, the perfect wedding to Rebecca Adams, heiress to one of the largest private investment corporations in the country. The Adams family had money older than the state of California itself, and Rebecca had grown up in a world of private schools, private islands, and private everything. The press adored her elegance and the way she handled cameras like someone who rehearsed every gesture. Together, Ethan and Rebecca looked like the kind of couple magazines put on their covers for holiday editions: perfect teeth, perfect posture, and perfect compatibility, at least on paper. Everything about the ceremony screamed luxury. The floral arrangements alone could be paid for college tuition. White roses had been flown in from Ecuador at dawn, arranged into towering displays that lined the walkway from the sidewalk to the church entrance. Crystal lanterns hung from the trees, catching the morning light like tiny stars. A customizable runner embroidered with the couple's intertwined initials had been rolled out minutes earlier. Even the security team looked like something from a presidential detail: discreet earpieces, tailored suits, black SUVs idling along the curb. Guests were already arriving, stepping out of limousines and chauffeured cars in gowns and tuxedos that cost more than a year's rent in most cities. Paparazzi snapped photos while influencers recorded live videos, narrating the scene to thousands of followers who were probably still in pajama pants. Every single person there expected a show. What they didn't expect was that the first dramatic moment of the day would arrive long before the bride did. When Ethan stepped out of his vehicle, a sleek black Cadillac Escalade, polished to mirror perfection, the crowd quieted as if someone had pressed pause. He always had that effect on people. Tall, composed, confident in the effortless way of someone who never needed to try. His suit was charcoal gray, custom, tailored, subtle but expensive, the kind of understated elegance that made stylists proud. His tie was perfectly knotted, his shoes shined like liquid. Cameras clicked in rapid succession. Several reporters whispered to each other, hoping he'd give a spontaneous quote. He didn't. He simply adjusted his cufflinks, thanked the driver, and started walking toward the steps of the church with the calm stride of a man who believed he was about to make one of the most important decisions of his life. His security team followed a step behind, scanning the crowd. Everything was controlled. Everything was planned. Everything looked exactly as it should. Until it suddenly wasn't. There, near the base of the stairs, almost swallowed by the shadow of the church wall, stood a small figure no one seemed to have noticed until Ethan was practically in front of her. She was thin, maybe 11 or 12, with tangled hair and a faded hoodie 2 sizes too big. Her shoes were worn down to the fabric, the kind of shoes you could only end up with if you walked too many miles with nowhere safe to go. Her face was marked with the kind of exhaustion no child should know, and she stared at Ethan like she had been waiting for him not for minutes, but for hours, maybe days. A few guests frowned, confused about how someone like her had gotten this close. A camera crew angled to the side, wondering if she was part of some unexpected publicity stunt. She wasn't. The girl took a step forward, then another. Her hands shook as if she were stealing courage from the air itself. Ethan slowed, unsure whether to keep walking or stop. Before he could decide, the girl lunged toward him, grabbing the sleeve of his suit with one hand and looking up with eyes wide from fear and something much darker. And then it happened. The words that would rip apart everything planned, everything rehearsed, everything assumed to be true. "Don't marry her," she said. Not loud enough to echo, but loud enough to carve through the morning like a knife. Gasps rose from the crowd. Cameras whirred. A bridesmaid who had just stepped out of her limo froze mid-pose. Even Ethan felt the weight of the words settle over him, heavier than the Pacific fog rolling in from the coast. The girl's voice trembled as she spoke again, her fingers tightening around his sleeve as if she feared being pulled away. She looked like someone who had seen something she shouldn't have, something impossible for a child to make up. Ethan's security reached toward her, but he lifted a hand, silently telling them to wait. There was something raw in her eyes, something urgent, and though he didn't know why, he felt he needed to hear her next words. Whatever she was about to say, it wasn't about money or attention or anything people might assume. There was terror in her posture, a desperation that didn't belong at a beautiful wedding, but somehow made perfect sense in that instant. Before anyone could stop her, before Rebecca could arrive with her polished smile and flawless timing, the girl leaned closer and whispered two words into Ethan's life, the two words that would unravel the entire day, the entire marriage, the entire illusion of what he thought was real. And Ethan realized instantly that nothing about this wedding was what it seemed. The moment the girl's warning pierced the air, everything around the entrance of St. Andrew's Church shifted. The easy confidence in Ethan's stride evaporated as confusion clouded his expression, and the flawless rhythm of the event fell out of sync. Photographers who had been preparing for the perfect groom shot now swung their cameras toward the unexpected disruption. Stylish guests paused on the walkway, adjusting sunglasses or whispering behind manicured hands as they tried to make sense of the scene. The hum of anticipation turned into a ripple of disbelief, the kind that spreads through a crowd like heat rising off pavement. The security team recovered first. They moved in quickly, not aggressively but with the efficiency of people trained to keep chaos at bay. Two agents stepped between Ethan and the girl, while a third approached her from behind, attempting to pry her hand off the groom's jacket. She didn't scream or shout. Instead, she tightened her grip, her dirty nails digging into the fabric in a way that felt less like desperation and more like conviction. Her eyes didn't waver from Ethan's, not even when the guard's hand circled her thin wrist. Without intending to, Ethan lifted a hand slightly, signaling them to stop. It wasn't a conscious decision, just a reflex, an instinct born from something he couldn't yet name. Maybe it was the fear in the girl's trembling jaw, or the defiance in her posture, or the fact that she looked like someone who had run miles simply to reach him. Whatever it was, it made him hesitate, and that hesitation was all the opening she needed. "If you go inside," she whispered fiercely, "you won't come out the same." Her voice carried a weight far too heavy for a child. The words shouldn't have meant anything, not to a man like Ethan, a man grounded in logic, in strategy, in the practical realities of billion-dollar decisions. Yet for reasons he couldn't explain, they hit him with the force of a physical shove. "What are you talking about?" he asked, lowering his voice just enough to avoid giving the paparazzi a headline they could twist. But the microphones were already extended toward him like metal flowers eager to bloom. The crowd sensed that something real was happening, something unscripted, something raw, and they wanted to catch every second of it. The girl swallowed hard, her face tightening as if she were bracing for pain. "You can't marry her," she repeated, this time more urgently. "She's lying to you." The guard behind her tugged at her elbow again, more insistent now, but she shook him off with surprising strength. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "She's going to hurt you." From the corner of the walkway, a group of bridesmaids emerged, their pastel dresses fluttering in the California breeze. They were talking excitedly among themselves until their eyes landed on the scene unfolding. One of them, a tall brunette with a clipboard, clearly the maid of honor, rushed forward, heels clacking sharply. "What is happening?" she demanded, as if the situation itself had offended her. Is this some kind of sick stunt? Who let her through security? She glared at Harper as though the mere presence of a child living on the streets was an insult to her color. Coordinated ceremony schedule. The girl flinched at the tone, but her hand stayed firmly on Ethan's sleeve. I'm not here to ruin anything, she said quickly, her voice wavering. I'm trying to stop a mistake. A really, really bad one. Ethan exhaled slowly. He wasn't angry, just unsettled, the way a person becomes when a stranger calls them by a nickname only their family uses. Something didn't add up. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, a reporter pushed forward, shoving a microphone dangerously close to his chin. Mr. Donovan, is this girl claiming your fiancée is hiding something from you? Another reporter chimed in. Is the wedding being delayed? A third, is this a political statement, a protest, a publicity stunt? The questions fired rapidly, overlapping, building pressure. Ethan's pulse quickened. He hated public spectacles. The whole reason he had chosen St. Andrew's, a private, tucked-away church, was to keep the ceremony intimate. But now his wedding was turning into breaking news before it even began. Everyone stepped back, one of the security agents ordered, shielding Ethan with his body. The media reluctantly moved a few inches, not because they respected the command, but because they didn't want to be thrown out before the ceremony. They hovered like hungry birds waiting for the next crumb of drama. The girl looked overwhelmed for the first time, shrinking slightly under the barrage of voices and lenses. Her fingers trembled against Ethan's sleeve, but she forced herself to speak again. I heard them, she said quietly, breathlessly. I heard Rebecca and her lawyer talking. They said once you re-inside, there's no turning back. They said you'd sign something without thinking, because you don't like embarrassing yourself in public. They said, she looked down, fighting the pressure building behind her eyes. They said you'd make it easy for them. Ethan froze. Not because of the accusation people accused billionaires of being or manipulated all the time, but because of the phrasing. He had been told that exact thing before. By his father, by Montalvo, by several board members who believed he was too soft, too trusting, too focused on charity instead of profit. No one outside his inner circle would know that. Certainly not a child living on the street. You heard them where? He asked, the question heavier than it sounded. The girl took a shaky breath. In a room, some office building. I sleep behind it sometimes, near the loading dock. The window was open. I heard Rebecca talking about the contract. They said it would be activated through marriage. They said something about a confirmation signature. A murmur rippled through the guests closest to the conversation. A few exchanged glances, others stiffened. They didn't know the details, but they recognized the tone of something dangerous. Ethan felt his stomach tighten, a dull ache forming beneath his ribs. What contract? He asked quietly. She looked up, her eyes large and frightened. The one that changes everything. The one that's going to take your things. She didn't have the vocabulary for legal language, but the fear in her voice communicated enough. Who told you that? He asked. No one told me, she insisted. I heard it. They said your name. They said your foundation. They were laughing. The guard behind her stepped forward again, his patience thinning. Sir, with all due respect, she's a minor and clearly unstable. We need to move her away, and don't you touch her, Ethan snapped, sharper than he intended. The guard recoiled. The gasp from the crowd was immediate. People weren't used to hearing Ethan raise his voice. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to steady his breath. This wasn't making sense. It shouldn't make sense. And yet every instinct in him screamed that the girl wasn't lying. Or at least, she believed what she was saying. Before he could respond, the doors of a limousine further down the street opened, and the crowd shifted again. A ripple passed through the guests, a murmur that indicated someone important had arrived. Probably Rebecca. But for the first time since he stepped out of the Escalade, Ethan didn't turn toward the commotion. His attention stayed locked on the girl who had disrupted everything because somehow, impossibly, she might be the only person telling him the truth. The moment the girl uttered the two forbidden words mirror claws the atmosphere outside St. Andrews shifted from uneasy curiosity to something far sharper, almost metallic. It was as if the phrase itself sliced through the morning air, exposing nerves no one was prepared to have touched. Ethan felt the words hit him like a chill running down his spine. Not many people knew about that clause. In fact, only 3 people should be known him: Rebecca and attorney Salazar. Certainly not a homeless child standing outside a wedding she clearly had no connection to. The guests closest to Ethan exchanged looks, some frowning, some tilting their heads as though the phrase echoed faintly in their memory. But none of them could truly understand what it meant to him. For Ethan, those two words weren't just legal jargon. They were warning he had been actively trying to ignore for weeks. Now they had come back to him through the most unlikely messenger imaginable. He stared at the girl, searching her face for a clue. She didn't look like someone who could be possibly known anything about private legal documents. She looked like she hadn't had a real meal in days. Her backpack, if it could be called that, was patched together with mismatched fabric, and her hoodie was stretched at the sleeves from being pulled on too roughly. But her eyes carried something sharp. Not the kind of sharpness born from intellect, but from survival. From overhearing things she wasn't meant to hear. From living in the cracks of the city where secrets slip out through open windows and half-closed doors. "Where did you hear that?" Ethan asked, his voice low but urgent. He didn't care about the reporters anymore. He didn't care about the cameras or the guests or the fact that every second of this was being live-streamed to thousands of viewers waiting to judge him. Right now, nothing mattered more than understanding how a child on the street had learned a phrase he had been assured would remain confidential. The girl looked down, her chest rising and falling too quickly. "I told you," she murmured, "behind the office building, near the loading dock. They didn't see me. But you remember the words exactly. It wasn't really a question." She nodded anyway. "They said it would only work if you signed something after the ceremony. They said you'd never question it, because you'd be too busy trying to look good for the press." She glanced briefly toward the reporters, then quickly back at Ethan. "They said you care more about what people think than what's actually happening." Ethan clenched his jaw. The words stung because they were familiar. He had been accused of caring too much about optics before by his father, by board members, by people who believed empathy was a weakness. But to hear someone else parroting at someone who had no reason to say it, someone who had overheard it, that was different. That was terrifying. His heart thudded harder, each beat sensing with the roar inside his head. The reporters surged closer again, sensing the tension. One called out, "Mr. Donovan, what exactly is the mirror clause?" Another added, "Are you calling off the wedding?" "Ethan, look here." "Turn this way." Is the girl telling the truth? The shouts blended into a chaotic blur, but the girl didn't flinch. She stood rooted to the spot, her voice small but steady as she said, "You don't believe me." "But you should." A bridesmaid scoffed audibly behind them. "This is ridiculous. Somebody escort her out before the bride sees this." The maid of honor nodded sharply, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Ethan, you can't let this continue. This girl's clearly disturbed. She shouldn't be anywhere near the ceremony." Ethan didn't respond. He didn't even hear them. The mirror clause wasn't something he could ignore. It was something he had already been uneasy about. For weeks, something had felt wrong. The constant pressure to sign a series of documents. The insistence that everything had to be finalized after the wedding, not before. The refusal to give him the final version until the morning of the ceremony. Rebecca dismissing his concerns with a kiss and a soft laugh. "It's just formality, babe." Attorney Salazar saying, "We'll handle the complicated parts. You just enjoy your day." His father adding, "Stop overthinking. Sign the papers and move on. The world doesn't pause because you re-sentimental." But now this girl was standing in front of him, trembling, terrified, and somehow holding the most important piece of information in the entire puzzle. "What else did you hear?" he asked. The girl hesitated. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. They said once it goes through, there's nothing anyone can do. Not even you." "Goes through?" Ethan repeated. She nodded again. "The contract, the trust, the money thing." "What trust?" Ethan demanded. The girl's eyes darted to the security team, then back to Ethan. "The one they want your money in. The one Rebecca keeps calling the future asset plan. They said she deserves it because she's been waiting long enough." Ethan's breath hitched. That phrase, future asset plan, had come out of Salazar's mouth just 2 days earlier. It was supposedly an investment strategy for the foundation. Now it sounded like something entirely different. "You shouldn't know that," he whispered. "But I do." "Why were you even there?" "Because I sleep there sometimes," she admitted, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "It's warm near the vents." Sometimes the restaurants leave food in the trash that isn't too bad. I didn't mean to listen. I just heard them. I heard your name. I heard her say she was done pretending. I heard them laugh about you being too trusting. Ethan felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. Maybe he had sensed something off all along. Maybe he had ignored his instincts because he wanted to believe in Rebecca, wanted to believe in the stability she represented, wanted to believe he wasn't making the same mistakes his father warned him about. But now a child, a complete stranger whose life couldn't be farther from his own, was telling him the truth everyone else had concealed. "Sir, we need to secure the area," one guard insisted, stepping forward again. "This is not appropriate for the groom. If you pull her away from me," Ethan said coldly, "you refired." The guard froze. So did several guests. No one was used to Ethan speaking like that. But Ethan wasn't concerned with preserving anyone's comfort. He was trying to piece together a betrayal that felt deeper with every passing second. The girl tugged gently on his sleeve again, her voice cracking. "I didn't want to come," she whispered. "But I kept hearing them say today was the day. They said once you were inside that church, everything is locked. They said your signature would be automatic because you'd be overwhelmed. They said," her lips trembled. "They said you wouldn't question anything until it was too late." Ethan inhaled sharply. Too late for what? She looked up at him with eyes far older than her age. Too late to save what's yours. Thunder rolled somewhere inside Ethan's chest. He wasn't sure if it was fear or rage or both. But one thing was certain: this girl wasn't lying. She didn't have the vocabulary to fabricate something this precise. She didn't have the motive. She didn't have the ability. And she definitely didn't have the chance unless she had been exactly where she said she had been. He glanced back at the church, at the pristine doors, the white roses, the eisel runner embroidered with his initials and Rebecca's. Every detail suddenly felt tainted. He looked again at the girl, who seemed ready to crumble but refused to look away. She wasn't here to ruin a wedding. She was trying to stop a disaster. And Ethan finally realized that the worst part wasn't that Rebecca had kept secrets from him. The worst part was that a child living behind an office building had tried harder to warn him than anyone in his own life ever had. Ethan barely had time to process the girl's last words before another surge of movement rippled through the crowd. A string of gasps, hushed whispers, and hurried rustles of fabric spread across the church courtyard as more guests craned their necks toward the street. A glossy black limousine had just pulled up, the kind only political families or old money dynasties used, a vehicle polished so perfectly that the California sun bounced off it like a mirrored blade. Every camera snapped in unison. Reporters elbowed their way forward. Bridesmaids straightened their dresses, angling their bodies as though preparing for a magazine cover. And the maid of honor exhaled with visible relief. Finally, she muttered, "Rebecca's here." But Ethan didn't turn. Not immediately. Not like he was supposed to. His eyes remained fixed on the girl, this trembling child with a voice full of truth and a story too dangerous to dismiss. The limo door opened with a gentle hydraulic hiss, and a perfectly manicured hand extended outward, followed by the unmistakable silhouette of Rebecca Adams, dressed in a custom designer gown the color of fresh pearl. She looked breathtaking, flawless, ethereal in a way that only money and meticulous planning could achieve. Her gown alone shimmered under the sun like 1,000 tiny crystals set ablaze. The train trailed behind her in billowing waves, carried carefully by 2 attendants. Her hair was styled in a classic Hollywood updo, every strand pinned with deliberate precision. She stepped out with a smile, the kind of smile her family had perfected over generations, one that projected warmth and confidence but revealed nothing real underneath. The moment she appeared, the crowd erupted, applause, cheers, flashing lights, guests pulling out their phones to capture the bride's grand entrance. But Ethan still didn't turn. The only person watching Rebecca's arrival with unfiltered fear was the girl gripping his sleeve. She shrank behind him as though expecting to be dragged away. When Rebecca finally looked toward the commotion at the stairs, her elegant smile faltered. Just a flicker. But enough for Ethan to catch. Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, like someone spotting a stain on her white carpet. She walked forward, her steps smooth, deliberate, elegant, yet there was a new tension in her posture now. Every inch she advanced toward Ethan, her composure tightened. The closer she got, the clearer her expression became. She was not pleased. Not confused, not curious. Furious, she approached with the calculated calm of someone accustomed to controlling every room she entered. "Ethan," she said sweetly, but her tone was razor-thin underneath. "What's going on here?" The reporters swarmed, microphones rising like a metal forest. "Rebecca, is the wedding still happening? Do you know this girl? Is there a problem with the prenup? What is the mirror clause?" Rebecca's smile stayed in place, but her jaw flexed. "Everyone please," she said, exhaustion woven into her voice like silk. "Give us a moment." She reached for Ethan's arm, but he subtly shifted away. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't confrontational, but it was enough to make her eyes sharpen. She lowered her voice. "We need to talk. Alone." The girl tugged on Ethan's sleeve again. "Don't go with her," she whispered urgently. "Please." "She's enough," Rebecca snapped, turning her cold gaze on the child. "Who brought her here?" "She approached me," Ethan said. "She has something important to say." Rebecca let out a breath that was far too controlled to be natural. "Ethan, she's a child. A homeless one at that. She's probably confused. Or maybe someone put her up to this." "No one put me up to anything," the girl said, stepping forward despite the tremble in her knees. "You were in the office with the lawyer. You were laughing." Rebecca's face didn't change, not in any dramatic way, but something behind her eyes froze, a small, barely perceptible crack in her polished mask. She quickly recovered, smiling again, this time with pity so forced it stung the air. "Sweetheart," she said to the girl, "I don't know what you think you heard, but this is a wedding. Not a place for you to invent stories." Ethan's breath caught. He wasn't a fool. He had been in enough boardrooms, enough negotiations, enough political fundraisers to recognize when someone was lying, especially someone trained to lie beautifully. And right now, Rebecca was lying so smoothly it almost sounded like truth. "Rebecca," he said slowly, "she mentioned the mirror clause." Her lips twitched, a fraction, but it was enough. "I don't know what that is," she replied, shrugging. "You do," Ethan said, his voice harder. "You and Salazar both." Rebecca's throat tightened for a split second. Then she laughed lightly, dismissively, the way actors do in interviews when asked about rumors. "Ethan, darling, we've gone over so many legal terms these past weeks. I can't possibly remember all of them." The girl shook her head fiercely. "She's lying." Rebecca's smile cracked. "Just a hairline fracture, barely visible unless someone was looking closely." "Ethan was." "This child," Rebecca said sharply, "is ruining your wedding." "Or saving it," Ethan murmured. The crowd gasped. Rebecca exhaled sharply, then stepped even closer, lowering her voice to a dangerous whisper. "What exactly did she tell you?" "Enough," Ethan answered. "Enough to know something's wrong." Rebecca's faade finally slipped, anger seeping through the cracks. "Ethan," she hissed, "you don't walk away from a wedding because a filthy little..." She stopped herself. But the damage was done. The girl recoiled as if slapped. A reporter's microphone caught the half-spoken insult, and a murmur of disgust rippled through the guests. Ethan stared at Rebecca, unsure whether he was witnessing the real her for the first time, or simply noticing what he'd been blind to for too long. "Is that how you talk about people?" he asked quietly. "People who have nothing." "I talk that way about people who sabotage multi-million-dollar events," she retorted. "We were trying to build a life here, Ethan. A powerful one. And you letting a child manipulate you." "She knows things she shouldn't know," Ethan said. "And that scares me a lot more than her being wrong." Rebecca's eyes hardened. "If you walk away right now, you will humiliate me. You will humiliate both of our families. You will humiliate yourself." The girl's hand tightened again on his sleeve, anchoring him in place with a grip far stronger than her small frame should be allowed. "She doesn't care about you," the girl whispered. "Just what you have." Ethan swallowed. Rebecca's voice softened, turning honey sweet, deadly in its warmth. "Ethan, baby," she breathed, "don't do this. Come inside. Everything will make sense once the ceremony starts." But that was exactly what terrified him. Because now, every instinct told him that once he walked into that church, he was walking into a prison disguised as a wedding eisel. And for the first time since the morning began, Ethan Donovan took a full step back away from Rebecca, and toward the truth he'd been trying not to see. Ethan felt the tension coil tighter in his chest as he stepped back from Rebecca, her perfume lingering in the air like a warning he could suddenly smell clearly for the first time. The crowd around them pulsed with curiosity, the cameras flashing like lightning bolts, capturing every shift in expression, every twitch of muscle. It was the sort of public pressure that usually pushed Ethan to perform, to keep the peace, to maintain an image. But today, all of that felt meaningless. A new atmosphere settled over the courtyard, one that made him see every detail through a sharper, more unforgiving lens. And the girl, still gripping his sleeve, was the only thing grounding him. Rebecca straightened her posture, lifting her chin as though reclaiming authority. "Ethan," she said, voice softening to mask the anger burning beneath it, "you letting paranoia ruin a day we planned for months. This wedding is about commitment, about trust. We becoming partners in everything." Her tone dipped ever so slightly. "In life, in legacy, in assets." Ethan's eyes narrowed. Assets. The word scraped his nerves. Rebecca had used it before casually, playfully, in moments meant to appear romantic. But now he heard it for what it truly was, a term of possession, not partnership. The girl tugged at his sleeve again, just enough to pull his attention back to her. "That's what they want," she murmured. "Your assets. All of them." Rebecca's eyes flashed sharp as broken glass. "Oh, for God's sake," she snapped. "This is absurd. Ethan, we need to go inside now. We need to do the vows, finish the ceremony, then you and I will sign the confirmation documents after. That's all this is about." A wave of cold spread through Ethan's bloodstream. It was subtle, but undeniable. She had admitted the timing too quickly. And worse, she hadn't said what confirmation documents. She assumed he already knew. Or worse, assumed he would sign without questioning. "You didn't tell me anything was being signed today," Ethan said. Rebecca blinked. "Of course I did." "You didn't." "I did," she insisted, but her voice wavered for the first time. "You must be forgotten. You've been stressed." "I'm not stressed," Ethan replied. "I'm alerted." A few guests murmured in confusion. The reporters leaned in even closer. Rebecca plastered on a delicate smile, the kind that made her seem composed to anyone who didn't know her. "Ethan, the mirror clause is just a formality. It's part of the asset protection plan for the trust." "There it is," the girl whispered, almost shrinking behind Ethan's arm. Ethan turned his full attention to Rebecca. "What trust?" Rebecca paused. A microsecond of hesitation, but enough for Ethan to catch it like a dog hearing something humans couldn't. "The Adams Donovan Marital Trust," Rebecca finally said. Her tone was glossy, rehearsed. "It ensures both families' wealth is secure. My family insisted on it." "No," the girl muttered, gripping Ethan's sleeve. "That's not what they said." Ethan looked down at her gently. "Tell me exactly what you heard." Her voice trembled, but her words were firm. "They said once you sign the confirmation paper, everything with your name goes into the new trust. They said she'll have control because you'll be the non-managing spouse. They said you wouldn't notice because the contract is long and confusing." She swallowed. "They said you'd be too busy posing for pictures to read it." A hush fell over the crowd. Two reporters nearly tripped over each other trying to reposition their microphones. A bridesmaid gasped so loudly she clapped a hand over her mouth. Rebecca scoffed, but her voice was tight. "This is nonsense. Legal jargon is complicated." She probably overheard something she didn't understand, but Ethan did understand too well. He'd heard the term before, non-managing spouse. It meant one partner had full legal control of the marital trust, full access, full power, full decision-making rights. If the mirror clause activated, it would trigger the automatic transfer of Ethan's business holdings and foundation assets into the trust. Assets he spent years building. Assets built from nothing, without a cent from the Adams family. Assets tied to schools, shelters, veterans programs, things he cared about more than money. And once inside the trust, everything would legally belong not to him, but to the trust's managing spouse. "Rebecca." Ethan stepped back further, his heartbeat heavy, loud, and unsteady. "You wanted me to walk down that aisle," he said slowly, "so that afterward, you could put a pen in my hand and take everything." Rebecca's expression snapped from gentle persuasion to stinging indignation. "How dare you?" she hissed. "After everything we planned. After everything I've given you." "What you've given me," Ethan repeated. "Or what you were planning to take." A ripple of shock passed through the guests. Rebecca's voice broke into a shrill, trembling pitch. "You think I need your money? My family built empires before yours existed. You think I'd risk everything for a few $1,000,000? My net worth isn't a few million," Ethan said calmly. "And it's not the money I'm thinking about, it's control." The girl whispered, "That's what they said too." Rebecca shot her a glare sharp enough to slice steel. Then she turned back to Ethan, voice coated in poison and honey at the same time. "Ethan, baby, don't do this. If you humiliate me today, there will be consequences. There will be fallout. Don't throw away our future. Ethan wasn't listening anymore. Not to her words. Not to the noise around them. His mind ran through every recent red flag, the meetings he wasn't included in, the documents delayed until the last minute, his father's unusual silence about the details, Salazar insisting on handling everything privately for efficiency. He had ignored all of it. And now a child was piecing together the truth he didn't want to see. He met Rebecca's eyes. Why didn't you tell me about the post-ceremony signature? She didn't answer. Why didn't you tell me the trust activates through marriage? Still no answer. Why didn't you tell me about the managing spouse clause? Her jaw clenched. Why, Ethan asked quietly, did a homeless girl tell me the truth before my own fiancée did? Rebecca's voice finally cracked. Because she wasn't supposed to hear it. The courtyard erupted. Guests gasped, reporters shouted, cameras flashed with frantic intensity. The girl flinched behind Ethan. Rebecca froze, realizing what she had just revealed. The anger faded from her expression, replaced by a flicker of fear. Just a flicker, but Ethan saw it. Ethan, she whispered, stepping toward him again, please let's just go inside and talk. Ethan didn't move. Rebecca reached for him once more. This time, he stepped back with clarity, not doubt. No, Ethan said, we were not going inside. The girl exhaled, relief washing over her small frame. Rebecca's mouth fell open in horror as her entire plan, months, maybe years in the making, began to collapse on the marble steps of Andrew's church. For a moment, everything around Ethan felt strangely distant, the flowers, the hushed crowd, the steady California breeze moving through the courtyard. It was as if someone had slowly turned down the world's volume, leaving only the pounding in his chest and the girl's trembling hand clutching his sleeve. He wasn't just standing in front of Andrew's church anymore. He was standing at the edge of something deeper, something far more personal than a wedding contract or a financial scheme. And the next words out of Harper's mouth pushed him right over that edge. They were going to use your foundation, Harper whispered, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and urgency. They said if you didn't sign, they'd do something to your charity. They kept saying it's your weak spot. Ethan stiffened so visibly that even the reporters paused. His foundation was the one part of his life, untouched by business conflicts, untouched by board politics, untouched by the Adams family. It was the closest thing he had to a purpose that wasn't wrapped in numbers or profit. It was the last piece of his mother's legacy, the one she left unfinished when she passed away. And hearing that had been dragged into this weaponized behind his back hit him harder than any attempt at financial manipulation. What did they say about my foundation? He asked, voice low and controlled, but threaded with unmistakable tension. Harper hesitated, her eyes flicking nervously toward Rebecca before returning to Ethan. They said if you refused the plan, they'd make the foundation look dirty. Like you took money from the donors. Like you lied about the numbers. They said all they had to do was leak a fake report and everyone would believe them. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Several people who had donated to the foundation shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another as if weighing the possibility of such a scandal. Rebecca stepped forward, her gown rustling sharply. This is absurd. This child doesn't know what she's talking about. Ethan, sweetheart, she's inventing stories now because she sees you were listening. You cannot possibly believe. Stop talking, Ethan cut in, his voice dropping so suddenly and so decisively that Rebecca flinched. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply final. He turned his full attention back to Harper. Tell me exactly what you heard. Harper's throat tightened, but she obeyed. They said the foundation is the cleanest lever, because everyone trusts you. They said if you pushed back, they would push harder. They said something like public opinion is his leash. And then the man with the ring said. She stopped abruptly. The man with the ring, Ethan repeated, dread forming like ice in his chest. Harper nodded. The big ring, the gold one with the crest. Ethan felt the world tilt slightly. His father wore that ring, always had, wore it like a crown. Donovan Sar. A man whose power was built on backroom deals and strategic ruthlessness, had a reputation for using people like chess pieces. But Ethan had always believed, foolishly, that he was the one piece his father would never move. He was there. Ethan asked, the dryness in his voice betraying him. Harper nodded again. He said if you didn't cooperate, they'd snap the foundation in half. Like it was easy. The air in Ethan's lungs froze. cold, heavy, suffocating. His father involved in this, his father helping Rebecca. His father willing to destroy the one thing Ethan cared about that didn't overlap with business. The betrayal hit him harder than any of Rebecca's lies. Rebecca sensed his shift, saw the tremble behind his restraint, and lunged for control of the situation. "Ethan, this is ridiculous." "Your father would never." "You don't get to speak for him," Ethan snapped. Seeing him unravel, the reporters surged again. "Mr. Donovan, is your father involved? Is this a corporate scandal? Is this wedding part of a financial merger? Are you calling it off? Is the girl telling the truth about a conspiracy?" Harper took a tiny step closer to Ethan, her voice cracking. "I didn't want to tell you this part. I didn't want to get anyone hurt. But they were talking about you like you were already trapped. They said today was the day they would lock you in. And if you didn't sign, they'd ruin your name so bad your foundation would lose everything." Ethan's jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening. His mind raced through every memory of his father pushing him toward this marriage, insisting it was strategic. Dismissing Ethan's questions about the financial integration paperwork, insisting these things are normal in high net worth families. He remembered the silence when Ethan asked for more time, the irritation, the pressure, the expectation, and now it all made sense. Rebecca saw the shift in his eyes and snapped, "Ethan, don't listen to her. She probably overheard some random conversation and twisted it. You know how easy it is to misunderstand high-level discussions." Harper dug her heels in. "I heard exactly what I heard. They said once you signed the confirmation paper, the trust would have everything. The company, the investments, the foundation, all of it." "That's not how it works," Rebecca started. "That's exactly how it works," Ethan interrupted, his voice deadened with realization. "A managing spouse trust can swallow everything. And if the mirror clause mirrors my holdings into the trust automatically," he shook his head in disbelief. "The foundation wouldn't just be vulnerable. It would be theirs." Rebecca opened her mouth but no sound came out. This time she didn't have an excuse ready. No charming lie, no sweet spin, no elegant deflection. Because Harper had spoken the truth, and Ethan had finally connected the dots. He took a slow breath, his hands trembling ever so slightly as he looked down at the little girl who had been brave enough to stand in front of a billionaire, a manipulative bride, a legal trap, and the press just to tell him the truth no one else dared. "You warned me," he said softly. Harper nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because no one else was going to." The crowd shifted again, unsettled, sensing the turning point. Rebecca was unraveling, her voice rose with panic now. "Ethan, you overreacting. This child is manipulating you. You throwing away everything we've built." "What we've built," Ethan echoed. "Or what you were planning to steal." Rebecca's face contorted in fury. "After everything my family offered you, you ungrateful." "Stop," Ethan said. She froze. "This wedding isn't happening," he said finally. A loud gasp shook the courtyard. Someone dropped their program booklet. A bridesmaid swayed like she might faint. But Rebecca reacted with pure venom. "If you walk away," she hissed, "your foundation is dead. Your name is dead. Your reputation is dead. They'll take everything." Ethan looked her straight in the eye. "No," he said, "they won't." He placed a protective hand on Harper's shoulder. "Because now I know exactly what you're all capable of." Ethan was still processing the weight of Harper's warning when she tugged gently at his sleeve again, her small hand trembling as she gathered the courage to say something she had clearly been holding back. Her gaze drifted across the courtyard, scanning the watching faces, the cameras, the stunned guests. She didn't look at Rebecca, she avoided her entirely, as though the mere sight of her might make the words harder to speak. When she finally returned her eyes to Ethan's, there was something haunted in them, something far older than her age. "There was someone else," Harper whispered. "A man, a nice man. He tried to help me once, and they did the same thing to him." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean?" Harper swallowed hard, her voice tightening. "He was like you, kind. He talked to me sometimes behind the building, asked if I was getting enough to eat. He helped other people too, said he believed in giving chances to kids like me. He wasn't rich like you, but he was good." She looked down at her shoes, if ashamed to say his name. His name was Jamie. Ethan's expression softened, but the dread in his chest sharpened. "What happened to him?" Harper took a shaky breath, hugging her thin arms around herself. "He trusted people he shouldn't have, important people. dressed nice, talked like everything was a business thing. They said they were going to partner with him. They said they were going to help him build something for his community. And he believed them. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. Her eyes locked on Harper with growing irritation, but Ethan stepped subtly in front of the girl, blocking Rebecca's view completely. What did they do to Jamie? Ethan asked, his voice quiet but pulsing with urgency. Harper's voice grew smaller. They made him sign something he didn't understand. He said it was supposed to help him get funding, but after he signed, everything changed. She hesitated, gripping her sleeves so tightly her knuckles whitened. He told me he was scared. He said they were using his name in places he didn't approve. They took control of his charity project, changed things, said he owed them for helping him. And when he tried to fight back, her words trailed off, swallowed by a tremor that ran through her entire body. Ethan crouched slightly, lowering himself to her level. It's okay, he said, tell me. Harper's eyes shimmered. They ruined him. People stopped trusting him. The donors disappeared. The police came to his apartment a bunch of times, and he kept saying it wasn't his fault. He didn't take money from anyone. He didn't lie. He didn't cheat. She wiped her face with her sleeve, but nobody listened. A hush fell over the crowd, heavier, colder than before. Even the reporters paused, sensing something too real, too raw, too human to sensationalize just yet. Ethan's voice grew tight. What happened to Jamie after that? Harper hesitated, then whispered, he disappeared. The word hit Ethan like a punch. Disappeared. She nodded. He told me he was leaving the city, that he couldn't stay here anymore, that people wanted things from him he couldn't give. He said he trusted the wrong people. She blinked back tears, and then one day he just didn't come back. His stuff was gone. His car was still there, but he wasn't. Ethan's stomach twisted. How long ago was that? About 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The timeline barely had room for coincidence. Meetings Rebecca had been vague about. Phone calls she had stepped away for. Legal documents arriving late. His father's sudden interest in the wedding being handled correctly. Jamie wasn't a random cautionary tale. Jamie was a test run. Harper pressed on, voice soft but steady now that she had opened the floodgate. I saw the man with the ring talking to Salazar the day before Jamie left. He said something about Jamie being taken care of, that he wasn't an issue anymore. And the next morning Jamie was gone. Ethan's jaw locked so tightly he thought it might crack. The anger smoldering in him grew hotter, clearer, more focused. He wasn't just hearing about a mistake, he was hearing a pattern. A system. A method of breaking people who didn't play along. A method now aimed at him. He tried to warn someone too, Harper added. One of his friends. But nobody believed him because the bad guys made it look like Jamie was the problem. They said he mismanaged money. They said he lied. She shook her head again, but he didn't. I know he didn't. Rebecca scoffed under her breath, unable to hold it in any longer. This is ridiculous. Ethan, you cannot seriously be basing your decisions on a child's urban legend. Homeless people tell stories all the time. It's how they get attention. Ethan turned toward her, slowly, with the controlled fury of someone who had reached the edge of patience. Harper stepped instinctively behind him. Urban legend, Ethan repeated. You think a child standing here shaking is inventing a conspiracy that just happens to match legal documents I haven't even seen yet. Rebecca crossed her arms tightly, nails digging into her skin as she tried to keep her composure. She's clearly confused. Or coached. Coached by who? Ethan snapped. She sleeps behind a loading dock. She eats leftovers from takeout bags. Who exactly do you think is coaching her? And why would they target you? Rebecca opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Ethan didn't wait for a response. He turned back to Harper. How did Jamie talk? Did he say anything about the contract? Harper nodded. He said he didn't understand it. That he thought it was just paperwork for a small loan. But then he realized it gave someone else the power to do things in his name. And when he tried to undo it, she swallowed. He said you can't undo it. Not once it's signed. A chill swept through Ethan. The mirror clause. The marital trust. The post-ceremony confirmation signature. A web designed to trap him exactly the same way. You re-saying they destroyed him, Ethan murmured. Harper nodded. Yes, and they joked about it. Like it was funny. Like he was stupid for trusting them. She looked up at Ethan, eyes shimmering with pleading. I don't want them to do that to you. The courtyard erupted again, gasps, whispers, shifting bodies, a collective wave of disbelief. But the only people who didn't move were Ethan and Harper. Ethan stood taller, straighter than he had all morning. For the first time, his doubt was gone, replaced by a certainty that felt as solid as the marble steps beneath their feet. He looked at Rebecca. "You knew about Jamie," he said quietly. Rebecca hesitated too long, too visibly. Ethan, that's not." "You knew," he said again. This time, it wasn't a question. Rebecca's expression cracked. Anger, fear, entitlement, every ugly layer surfaced. "You don't understand what was at stake," she hissed. "He wasn't cut out for that deal. We were helping him. If he couldn't handle it, that's on him." Ethan exhaled, disgust tightening his voice. "And you were going to do the same thing to me." Rebecca's face hardened. "We were securing the future." Ethan shook his head, stepping back from her completely now. "No," he said, "you were securing control." He looked down at Harper again, this small girl who had lost people, survived things he couldn't begin to imagine, and still found the courage to stand here and warn him. "Thank you," he whispered. Harper nodded, wiping her cheek. "I didn't want you to disappear too." Ethan turned back to the watching crowd. "This wedding," he said, loud enough for every camera to capture, "is over." The courtyard obsessed. Andrews seemed to exhale all at once when Ethan declared the wedding over, as if the building itself had been holding its breath along with everyone else. A ripple of shock passed through the crowd, and guests reacted in quick, chaotic bursts, some gasping, some whispering fiercely to each other, some pulling out their phones with the speed of people who sensed a scandal too good to miss. The reporters surged forward like a tide, microphones and cameras raised, their voices rising in a frantic, overlapping roar. The bridesmaids looked as though their entire social standing had just been set on fire. Even the groomsmen exchanged uneasy glances, shifting on their polished shoes as if bracing for the impact of whatever came next. But in the center of the chaos, between the mountains of roses and the white marble steps, Ethan and Rebecca faced each other in a pocket of frozen time. Harper remained behind Ethan, clutching his sleeve with one hand and pulling her ragged hoodie around herself with the other, as though she could disappear into the fabric if she tried hard enough. She looked terrified, but she didn't let go of him. Not anymore. Rebecca blinked once, twice. Her wide, perfect smile, already cracking earlier, finally collapsed completely. What emerged in its place wasn't sorrow or heartbreak. It was fury. Pure, unfiltered fury twisting through every line of her elegant face. Her breathing changed first, short, shallow, almost like she was trying to restrain something that wanted to claw its way out of her. When she finally spoke, her voice was nothing like the soft, curated charm she displayed for months. It was low, sharp, and dangerous. "What did you just say?" she asked. Ethan didn't flinch. "The wedding is over." The words seemed to hit Rebecca physically. She took a step closer, the train of her gown dragging harshly against the stone walkway. "No," she said, her voice almost trembling with disbelief. "No, you don't get to do that. You don't get to humiliate me in front of every investor, every donor, every family member who flew across the country. This isn't about them," Ethan replied. "This is about the truth." Rebecca's laugh slipped out, brittle and sharp like thin ice breaking. "The truth," she repeated. "You were really basing your future on whatever came out of that girl's mouth." She pointed at Harper with a manicured finger that looked like it could slice glass. "She's manipulating you. She's scared, she's homeless, she's looking for attention. And you're falling for it like some naive charity boy who thinks everyone who cries is innocent." Harper flinched, but Ethan stepped slightly to block Rebecca's line of sight. "No," Ethan said calmly. "I'm listening because she knows things she shouldn't know. Things you hid from me." Rebecca's lips curled, the anger slipping through the cracks. "Don't do this." Her voice wasn't soft anymore. It was commanding, demanding. A voice used to getting what it wanted. "You re not thinking clearly. You re letting emotions cloud your judgment. We planned a future together, a powerful one. Do you really want to throw it all away because you lied?" Ethan cut her off, over and over. That was the moment something in Rebecca snapped. Her eyes hardened to stone. Her voice dropped so low even the nearest guests had to lean forward to hear. "If you cancel this wedding," she said, each word cold enough to crystallize in the air, "I'll destroy you." Collective gasp rose from the crowd. A bridesmaid dropped her bouquet. One of the reporters audibly whispered, "Holy, did she really just say that?" Rebecca didn't care who heard. She didn't even look around to check. Her eyes were locked on Ethan with predatory intensity. Do you understand me? She continued, stepping closer until she was inches from him. You walk away from me, and I will tear your life apart. I will ruin your name so thoroughly no amount of charity work will ever save you. Ethan held her gaze unblinking. You already tried. Rebecca shook her head, her voice rising, brittle and furious. No. You have no idea what I can do. You think you're safe because you have money, because you have a board, because the public likes you. She leaned forward, her voice a sharpened whisper now. You have no idea how fast I can turn them all against you. Harper pressed herself closer to Ethan's side, fear flashing in her eyes. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her arm, but his attention never left Rebecca. Is that what you did to Jamie? Ethan asked softly. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, Rebecca froze. Real fear flickered across her face. The kind of fear people show when they realize their secrets aren't secrets anymore. Then she laughed again, crueler this time. You unbelievable, she spat. Comparing yourself to some failure who couldn't even keep a budget straight. Jamie was weak. He didn't have what it took to work with powerful people. So yes, she said, lifting her chin defiantly, we cut him out of the plan. And if he disappeared after that, that's not on me. A horrified murmur rolled through the courtyard. You destroyed him, Ethan said. Rebecca shrugged. He wasn't worth saving. And you think you were worth marrying? Rebecca's temper flared so brightly it was almost visible. I think I'm worth not insulting in public, she snarled. I think I'm worth respect. I think I'm worth loyalty. And I think you remaking the biggest mistake of your life. Ethan didn't respond. He just watched her, studied her, understood her as if seeing her for the first time, without charm, without the curated exterior, without the social polish. What stood before him wasn't a partner. Not even a person. It was a threat. Rebecca leaned in even closer, her voice venomous. If you walk away, she said, I will take your foundation. I will take your reputation. I will take every friend you have in this city. Do you hear me? I'll make you look like a fraud, like a thief, like a failure. And all of that, Ethan said quietly, is exactly why I'm walking away. The courtyard erupted again, louder this time. Reporters shoved forward, people whispered in disbelief, and even the security team looked thrown for a loop. Rebecca's composure finally shattered. She lunged toward Ethan, but one of the groomsmen stepped forward quickly, intercepting her before she made contact. She stumbled, caught herself, then glared at Ethan with a hatred so fierce it seemed to scorch the space between them. You redone, she hissed. Do you hear me? You refinished. Ethan shook his head slowly. No, Rebecca, I'm free. Rebecca stood frozen, trembling with rage, her dress glittering in the sunlight like broken glass. The perfect bride, the perfect wedding, the perfect plan unraveling in front of an entire city. And Ethan didn't feel fear. Not anymore. Because Harper had already warned him. I didn't want them to make you disappear too. And now, standing here in front of the woman who had threatened to destroy him, Ethan finally understood exactly how close he had come to becoming Jamie's replacement. The courtyard had descended into a chaotic buzz, half outrage, half stunned silence. All electrified tension, but as Ethan stood facing Rebecca's unraveling fury, the world seemed to sharpen into a terrifying kind of clarity. He could feel Harper's small hand anchored to his sleeve, the girl trembling from the sight of Rebecca, finally showing the monster behind her smile. People whispered in tight clusters, reporters shouted into microphones, and cameras flashed like a collapsing constellation. But none of that noise mattered anymore, because of what Harper had said next, the piece that tied everything together so perfectly, so devastatingly, that Ethan understood exactly how deep the betrayal went. They said they'd ruin your foundation, Harper whispered again, her voice barely audible over the chaos. They said that was the easiest way to break you. That you care about it too much. Ethan felt the words settle inside him with a painful heaviness. The foundation had always been his greatest pride. It was the one thing he had built without his father's money, without corporate influence, without Rebecca's world of high society manipulation. It was the only part of his life that had come from a place of love. His mother's dream, his promise to carry it on, and the idea that anyone would weaponize it against him was enough to shake him in ways he could not hide. Harper, Ethan said softly, tell me everything you heard about the foundation. Harper wiped her nose with her sleeve and tried to straighten her posture, though her legs trembled. They were laughing about it, she began. The woman Rebecca and the lawyer, and the man with the ring. They said you do all this stuff for kids and families and homeless people, but that no one would care if someone posted a story about you stealing from it. Ethan flinched at the cruelty of the statement, and Harper continued quickly, sensing his reaction. They said people believe bad things faster than good ones. They said everyone loves a downfall. They said if you refused to sign the paper after the wedding, they'd leak a report saying you misused donor funds, and that the press would jump on it. A sharp gasp rose from the crowd, loud enough that even the reporters fell silent for a moment. Rebecca's face tightened with something between panic and rage. That is absolutely not true, she snapped, but her voice was thin. This girl is clearly confused. She doesn't understand legal terminology. She understands manipulation, Ethan said. Probably better than you ever will. Rebecca shook her head violently, a few strands of hair falling from her perfect updo. Ethan, this is absurd. Do you know how easy it is to fake a scandal? Anyone could do it. Anyone in the business world knows. She stopped. Her eyes widened a fraction, realizing she'd said too much, admitted too much, implied too much. And everyone heard it. Reporters leaned in. Guests exchanged looks that spoke of doubt and discomfort. Even the bridesmaids, who had previously stood united behind Rebecca, slowly stepped apart, putting distance between themselves and the bride whose mask was slipping uncontrollably. Ethan's heart thudded painfully. You were going to destroy my mother's foundation, he said quietly, the betrayal carrying a weight that no crowd, no cameras, no public spectacle could soften. Just to control me. That's not what I said, Rebecca hissed, frantically trying to regain control. I said anyone could leak a report. Anyone could twist the numbers. You know how cutthroat the philanthropy world is. You were going to frame me as corrupt, Ethan said, the truth landing with finality. You were going to accuse me of stealing from the very people I promised my mother I'd protect. Rebecca's jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles in her neck quivered. If you had just signed. There it is, Ethan murmured. The guests erupted again. But the only person Ethan focused on was the young girl who had brought him the truth that no one else dared to reveal. What else did they say? He asked her gently. Harper swallowed hard. They said the foundation would be the first thing to fall, because it would make the rest easier. They said if people believed you were stealing from charity, they'd believe anything after that. Business fraud, lies, bad deals. They said the public just needs one push, and they'll turn. Ethan's stomach twisted. He could almost hear his father's voice in those words, cold, strategic, dismissive of human emotion. He could imagine Salazar's smug tone explaining it like a chess move. And he could picture Rebecca nodding along, perfectly comfortable destroying lives if it meant getting what she wanted. What about the donors? Ethan asked, his voice shaking. Harper hesitated. They said the donors trust Rebecca's family more than they trust you. That if something went wrong, everyone would blame you. Not them. She looked down. They said you'd be alone. Rebecca snapped her attention toward the girl. Stop talking. Harper flinched and went quiet. No, Ethan said immediately. Keep going. Rebecca spun toward him, her voice rising. Ethan, she is lying. This is what people like her do. They make up stories to get sympathy. She's trying to sabotage this day. She hasn't asked me for $1, Ethan said. Not one. Manipulation doesn't always look like begging, Rebecca shot back. Sometimes it looks like innocence. Sometimes it looks like someone pretending to be helpless. Ethan felt Harper shrink beside him. He knelt down slightly so his eyes were level with hers. You were not pretending, he said quietly. I know that. I believe you. Harper's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, but Ethan stood before she could say anything. He faced Rebecca, a calmness washing over him, a clarity so sharp that it cut through the chaos like a blade. You were going to ruin everything my mother built, he said. You were going to ruin me. Rebecca stepped forward, her eyes blazing. I was going to protect us, Ethan. That's what power looks like! That's what taking control of your legacy looks like. That's what destroying people looks like, Ethan replied. Rebecca's breathing grew louder, harsher. She pointed a trembling finger at him. If you walk away from me, you have no idea the storm you were walking into. You think you know how this city works, how these circles work. You have no idea what my family can do. Ethan didn't look away. I'm not scared of your family. She leaned closer, her voice a poisonous whisper. Then you read dumber than I thought. Ethan exhaled, then shook his head slowly. No, Rebecca, I'm free. Rebecca's expression twisted into something sharp and unrecognizable. "This isn't over," she spat. "If you think I'm letting you walk away from me without consequences." "Consequences you planned?" Ethan asked, "like destroying my fiancée and framing me, making me disappear like Jamie." Rebecca's eyes widened not with guilt, but with the realization that he knew everything. And the crowd, the cameras, the witnesses, they now knew too. Rebecca's world shattered right there on the marble steps. And Ethan finally understood how close he had come to losing everything. For a moment the courtyard hung between two worlds, one where this was still a wedding, a glamorous event full of prestige and cameras, and another where something darker pulsed beneath the surface, waiting for the right second to break through. Ethan stood at the center of that collision, Harper pressed close to him, Rebecca simmering with rage, and dozens of eyes watching the unraveling of everything that had been planned. He barely had time to process the depth of the threat against him, the sabotage foundation, the manipulation, the lies before the air shifted. A subtle change, a ripple of tension that moved through the crowd like a silent warning. It was Harper who felt it first. She stiffened beside him, her grip tightening on his sleeve with a sudden, fearful strength. Her gaze darted toward the street, wide and terrified, as if she had seen a ghost step into the daylight. "He's here," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Ethan, he's here." "Who?" Ethan asked, quietly but urgently. Harper didn't answer with words. She simply lifted her trembling hand and pointed. Beyond the chaos of the media, past the flashing cameras and stunned guests, a tall figure stepped out from between two parked SUVs, a man wearing a dark hoodie pulled low over his face, hands buried in his pockets. His movements soft and deliberate, like someone used to staying invisible until the exact moment he needed to strike. He blended with the shadows in a way that made him seem almost unnatural in the bright California sun. The moment Harper pointed, the man's head snapped toward her, and she froze. "That's him," she whispered, breath shaking. "That's the man I saw with your dad and the lawyer. The one who tried to take me before." The words hit Ethan like a jolt of electricity. He stepped instinctively in front of Harper, shielding her with his body. His security team, though trained and experienced, seemed momentarily disoriented by the sudden shift from scandal to potential danger. Their earpieces crackled as they tried to communicate, but the man moved with calculated confidence, weaving through the people as though he already knew exactly where he was going. The guests noticed him next. Conversations faltered, dresses rustled, and people subconsciously stepped aside, giving him a path without even meaning to. Something about him triggered an instinctive fear, a primal signal that said danger long before logic caught up. The man lifted his chin just enough for Ethan to see his eyes beneath the shadow of the hood, cold, empty, focused entirely on Harper. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline punch through his veins. "Back up," he murmured to Harper. "Stay behind me. Do not move." Harper obeyed instantly, her small hands clutching the back of Ethan's jacket as she retreated behind him, trembling so hard he could feel the shaking through the fabric. Rebecca saw the man too, but instead of fear, her face twisted with something darker, an expression that told Ethan she recognized him, that she expected him, that his presence wasn't a coincidence at all. She tried to recover her composure but failed. Her voice was thin. "Ethan, let's go inside now. This is getting out of hand." Ethan ignored her entirely. The man with the hood continued forward, slowly at first, then with purpose. One of the security guards finally broke through the shock, stepping into his path. "Sir, this is a private event. I'm going to need you to." The man shoved him aside with brutal efficiency, the motion so quick and powerful that the guard staggered sideways into a row of chairs. Gasps erupted from the spectators. Someone screamed. Another guest fumbled with their phone to call 911. Reporters surged closer, but the man's focus never wavered from Harper. Ethan felt Harper press her forehead into his back. "He's going to take me," she whispered, voice trembling. "He said he would if I told anyone. He said no one would miss me." A fury unlike anything Ethan had felt ignited in his chest. He stepped fully into the man's path. "You're not touching her." The man stopped a few feet short of Ethan. They stared at each other, the tension so thick it felt like the air was tightening around them. The man's expression didn't change. He wasn't afraid, wasn't hesitant. He was calculating. "Move," the man said. Ethan didn't. "I said move," he repeated, stepping forward. Security finally regained its bearings and rushed toward the man. But he pulled something from his pocket, a glint of metal, and the guards froze instantly, hands hovering near their holsters. Guests backed away, screaming, rushing up the church steps or toward their cars. Even the reporters retreated, though their cameras kept rolling. Harper whimpered behind Ethan. "Please don't let him take me." "I won't," Ethan said, his voice steady. It surprised even him how calm he sounded, how solid he felt. He had been raised in boardrooms, not dangerous streets, yet some part of him knew he couldn't step aside. Not now. Not when this child had risked everything to save him. The man's eyes flicked past Ethan to Harper. "She's not supposed to be here," he said. "She knows things she shouldn't." "You're not taking her," Ethan repeated. "You can't stop me." Ethan clenched his fists. "Try." The tension snapped like a whip. The man lunged. Ethan reacted on instinct, grabbing Harper and shoving her backward behind one of the marble planters. The man's arm swung past Ethan's shoulder, missing its target by inches. Ethan turned, blocking his path again, and the crowd erupted into screams. Security dove at the man from the side, trying to restrain him, but he threw one of them to the ground with frightening force. Another guard managed to get a hold on him, but the man slammed his elbow into the guard's ribs, sending him reeling. Rebecca screamed something unintelligible, stumbling backward in her heels. Her composure shattered entirely now. "Stop him. Do something." This wasn't supposed to. She cut herself off too late. Ethan heard it. Everyone heard it. "This wasn't supposed to what?" Ethan shouted. Rebecca froze, her face paling. But he couldn't focus on her anymore. The man had freed himself again, and was heading straight for Harper. Ethan sprinted, reaching Harper just as the man lunged for her. He wrapped one arm around the girl, pulling her behind him, and shoved the man back with every ounce of strength he had. The man stumbled but didn't fall. He tried again, but this time 3 security guards tackled him at once, dragging him onto the pavement. The man fought like a cornered animal, but numbers overpowered him. After a violent struggle, they pinned him down, pressing his face to the ground as guests looked on in horror. Ethan crouched beside Harper. "Are you hurt?" Harper shook her head, tears streaking down her cheeks. "I knew he'd come," she whispered. "I knew it." Ethan pulled her into a protective hold, the fear and adrenaline surging through him in equal measure. He looked up at Rebecca, who stood frozen, pale, shaking not from fear of the attacker, but from fear that her entire scheme was unraveling before her eyes. Ethan stared at her with a rage that made her step back. "How long?" he asked slowly. "Have you known about him?" Rebecca couldn't speak. But Ethan knew. She knew, and she hadn't planned to stop him. Chaos still throbbed across the courtyard. But now it had a different texture, less of a wedding gone wrong and more of a crime scene forming beneath the California sun. Guests huddled together, whispering urgently, some shaking, others recording everything with trembling hands. Security kept the hooded man pinned to the ground, though he continued struggling with a cold, determined fury, like someone who believed he had nothing to lose. Harper remained glued to Ethan's side, her fingers curled into his jacket like she thought he might disappear if she let go. Ethan stayed crouched beside her, one arm protectively around her back, his other hand pressed against the stone planter to steady his own nerves. Everything inside him felt like a live wire, buzzing with adrenaline. But underneath the shaking and the anger, there was a growing resolve, hard, undeniable, unbreakable. Then a sharp sound cut through the chaos, the unmistakable blare of police sirens approaching fast. The sound sliced through conversations, through panic, through the heavy cloud of suspicion that had settled over the courtyard. Heads whipped toward the entrance. A line of police cruisers slid into view, lights flashing red and blue across the marble facade of St. Andrews. The cars stopped abruptly, doors flying open as uniformed officers stepped out in synchronized motion, hands on their belts, scanning the scene with practiced precision. And among them was someone Ethan recognized long before she reached him. Laura Henderson, his attorney, one of the few people he trusted wholeheartedly in a world full of ulterior motives. She moved with sharp purpose, her tailored navy suit crisp despite the chaos, her heels clicking across the pavement with rapid, decisive rhythm. Her dark hair was pulled back into a sleek twist, her face focused and composed in a way that instantly calmed a portion of the chaos around her. She approached Ethan first, her expression shifting the moment she saw Harper curled against him. Concern replaced professionalism. "Ethan," she said urgently, crouching beside him, Are you hurt? He shook his head. No. But she almost was. He tilted his head toward Harper. This is Harper. She's the one who warned me. Laura nodded, her eyes softening. You re safe now, she told Harper gently. We re here. Harper nodded shakily but didn't let go of Ethan's sleeve. Laura's attention shifted to the hooded man, pinned to the ground by security and now surrounded by 2 officers. They need to separate him from the crowd, she said, standing again. He's not just trespassing, there's intent here. Serious intent. As the officers moved to take over, the hooded man stopped struggling. Instead, he turned his head just enough to glare at Ethan and Harper with chilling calm. You should have stayed quiet, he muttered toward Harper. You made this worse. Harper recoiled instantly, pressing closer to Ethan. Ethan's jaw tightened. Get him out of here, he demanded, the anger in his voice sharp and ice cold. The officers cuffed the man with practiced efficiency, hauling him toward a police cruiser. But even as he was dragged away, he kept looking at Harper with a gaze that sent cold dread crawling up Ethan's spine. The officers shoved him into the back seat and slammed the door, locking away that threat for now. Laura turned back toward Ethan. I came as soon as I got your message, she said, lowering her voice. But I also brought something you need to see. Something I should have shown you earlier. But I didn't have enough proof until this morning. Rebecca stiffened at the sound of Laura's voice and tried to regain her composure, straightening her gown and lifting her chin. Laura, she said coldly, you re-interfering in a private event. You have no authority here. Laura didn't even glance at her. This stopped being a private event the moment your hired muscle tried to kidnap a minor. Rebecca blinked hard, clearly caught off guard. I don't know what you re-implying. Oh, I think you do, Laura replied. The guests watched with wide eyes, sensing that everything was about to shift again, this time toward a truth they were hungry to hear. Laura reached into her leather briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with documents. She handed it directly to Ethan. Take a look. These are the final drafts of what Salazar filed this morning. Ethan frowned and opened the folder. The first page wasn't a contract, it was an email from Salazar, time stamped at 5:42 NM. Everything is ready. He signs after the ceremony, no exceptions. Mirror clause activates immediately. The trust becomes controlling interest by end of day. Rebecca gets the managing title as planned. Ethan felt his breath leave his body. Rebecca's face drained of color. The next page was the actual trust agreement. And there it was in black and whited: mirror clause activation through matrimonial union and post-ceremony confirmation signature. It was underlined, highlighted, and beneath it were instructions for transferring control of the Donovan Foundation assets into the marital trust. His throat tightened as he flipped through the pages, one damning detail after another. Email chains between Salazar and an unnamed number that Laura pointed to with her finger. That's your father's number, she said softly. The ground beneath Ethan seemed to tilt. His father, his own father, the man who had built an empire with cold precision. The man who had drilled into him that legacy mattered more than emotion. The man who had pushed him toward Rebecca with suffocating insistence. His father had been a part of this from the beginning. Ethan swallowed hard. How long have you had this? Laura exhaled. Pieces since last week, everything since this morning. I didn't want to come to you until I knew it was airtight. Rebecca's composure finally snapped. This is slander, she spat. You can't prove anything. These documents could be forged. This girl, she's lying. She's manipulating him. Laura raised an eyebrow. Interesting theory. Except the police already pulled the metadata from Salazar's account, because I requested a fraud investigation at 9 a.m. Rebecca blinked. You what? Laura continued, calm and controlled. Every file is verified. Every signature is real. Every timestamp is intact. The plan was laid out in detail: how you and your associates would control Ethan's assets, how you'd manipulate public perception, how you'd use the foundation scandal to break him if he resisted. Guests murmured, horrified. Ethan felt something cold spread across his chest, not shock anymore, but betrayal so deep it felt like a fracture. Laura handed him one last page. This is the worst part. It was a transcript, a recorded call. The voice was unmistakable. His father. He's too soft. Use the foundation if you have to. Once he signs, he's powerless. And if he pushes back, remind him what bad press does to the people he claims to help. Ethan froze completely. He didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Didn't move. Harper squeezed his hand. That's what I heard, she whispered. That's exactly what they said. Rebecca exploded with panic. This is out of context. You can't, Ethan. Don't listen to her. She's twisting. No, Laura cut in. We redone twisting things. The truth is right here. The courtyard fell utterly still as Ethan lifted his eyes. He looked at Rebecca. He looked at the police. He looked at the door where the hooded man had been taken. Then he looked at Laura, his attorney, his ally, and at Harper, the trembling child who had tried desperately to save him. And in that moment, Ethan truly understood the magnitude of what he'd almost walked into. Laura, he said quietly, get the officers to open a full investigation. Rebecca's face crumpled in horror. And make sure, Ethan added, voice steady, that every single person involved in this scheme is held accountable. The courtyard was no longer just a disrupted wedding scene. It had become a battleground of truth, betrayal, and unraveling power. As Laura handed the final piece of evidence to the officers, the crowd shifted with a collective sense of anticipation. Sensing the moment the tables truly turned, cameras zoomed in, phones recorded every tremble, every glare, every gasp. The police moved with renewed purpose, forming a perimeter around the key players, as if they already understood they were standing in the middle of something far bigger than a failed marriage. Ethan watched as the officers began comparing Laura's documents with their own notes, their expressions tightening as the scale of the conspiracy became clear. Rebecca, who moments earlier had been threatening him with a polished elegance, now stared at the officers with wide, disbelieving eyes. The color drained from her face, leaving her pale beneath her wedding makeup. Her voice cracked, rising in pitch as panic overtook her. No, you can't just take those files. You can't listen to her. This is our wedding. You can't turn my wedding into an investigation. Her shrill desperation echoed across the courtyard. A few bridesmaids instinctively stepped back, creating space between themselves and the imploding bride as if proximity itself were dangerous. Salazar, his expensive suit damp with sweat, pushed through the crowd next. His usually composed expression was twisted with stress and a hint of fear. He tried smoothing his hair back, tried adjusting his tie, but nothing made him look like the calm, confident attorney he prided himself on being. Detective, Salazar said quickly, forcing a smile, I believe there's been some confusion here. These documents are privileged. They were stolen, yes, stolen from my office. And this girl, this child, is clearly mistaken. I demand. The lead officer, a woman with sharp eyes and a commanding presence, held up her hand. You can demand all you want, Mr. Salazar. But we now have probable cause to investigate. And we also have a sworn statement from a minor who appears to be in danger. She gestured toward Harper, who clung to Ethan's arm with white-knuckled fear. And if even half of what she said is true, your office will need to answer for a lot. Salazar's face twitched. Detective, with all due respect, this is highly irregular. This is a misunderstanding. These types of financial documents are complex, and people often misinterpret them. Ethan doesn't fully understand the legal structure. Ethan stepped forward. Don't speak for me. Salazar swallowed hard. Ethan, you need to calm down. This is not the time to make rash accusations. No, Ethan said, voice steady and cold. It's the time to expose the truth. Rebecca found her strength in that moment, though it was not clarity, but hysteria. She stomped toward Ethan, her dress swishing in chaotic waves. You think this changes anything? She shrieked. You think you can walk away from me and walk away from this? You think you can drag me through the mud and just leave with your reputation intact? Her breathing grew ragged. I will not let you ruin me, Ethan. I will not let you destroy everything we built. We didn't build anything, Ethan said. You built a trap. Rebecca let out a sound somewhere between a gasp and a laugh. You ungrateful, but her tirade was cut off by the sudden slam of a car door. Everyone turned. A luxury black-town car had pulled up at the edge of the courtyard, and a familiar figure stepped out. Broad shoulders, expensive watch, the gold crest ring glinting under the sunlight. Ethan's heart sank. Donovan saw his father, the mastermind. The shadow behind every decision Ethan had felt pressured to make in the last several months. He walked toward the chaos with calm confidence, completely unfazed by the police presence. As though he were the one in control. As though he always had been. What's going on here? Donovan Sayre asked, his voice commanding the way it had since Ethan was a child. Ethan stood straighter. Harper pressed closer into his side, as if instinctively sensing the danger radiating from the man. Laura crossed her arms. The detective stepped forward. Mr. Donovan, we re in the process of opening an investigation into fraud, coercion, and conspiracy. Donovan, sir, didn't even blink. On whose authority? Mine, the detective replied. And the state of California's. The older man gave a tight, humorless smile. Detective, I believe you re-overstepping. This is a private matter. A family matter. Ethan felt a chill run through him. Those were the exact words his father always used when he wanted to cover something up. Laura stepped in before Ethan could speak. It stopped being private the moment your hired associate tried to abduct a minor. Donovan, sir. His expression flickered for the first time, just a microsecond of tension around the jaw, but he recovered quickly. I don't know what you re-talking about. Harper trembled. Ethan steadied her. She saw you, Ethan said. She heard you. You were part of this. Donovan's son chuckled. Actually chuckled. Ethan's son. You were listening to a homeless child over your own father. She hasn't lied to me, Ethan said. Donovan's eyes narrowed. And you think I have? Ethan didn't hesitate. Yes. The word hit harder than any physical blow. Donovan Sartre's face hardened like stone. You ungrateful boy, he growled. Everything you have because of me. Your name, your position, your influence. That foundation exists because I allowed it to exist. Ethan shook his head sharply. No. That foundation exists because Mom believed in it. And because I believed in what she stood for. Donovan Sir stepped closer, lowering his voice. This girl, he said, nodding toward Harper, is manipulating you. And this woman, he added, glaring at Laura, is poisoning you against your own blood. No, Ethan said. You did that all by yourself. Donovan's jaw clenched. If you do this, he warned, if you let this farce continue, you re-choosing the wrong side of this family. Ethan met his father's stare without blinking. There's only one side worth choosing, he said quietly, and it isn't yours. Gasps broke out around the courtyard. Donovan Sir stared, seething. Rebecca looked between them in disbelief, realizing her last ally had just shattered his connection with Ethan. Salazar looked like he might faint, and Harper, tiny and terrified, gripped Ethan's sleeve as if rooting him in place. The detective stepped forward. Donovan, she said to the older man, I'm going to have to ask you to stay where you are. You re-officially part of this investigation. Donovan Sart stepped back, outrage exploding across his face. This is ridiculous. You can't. We can, the detective said. And we will. Ethan inhaled deeply. For the first time all day he felt lighter, not safe yet, but freer. Laura placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You did the right thing, she said quietly. This is just the beginning. Ethan looked down at Harper, this small, brave girl who had risked everything to tell him the truth, and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. No, he said softly, this is the beginning of the end for them. Harper nodded, leaning into him for comfort. Ethan turned, facing the wreckage of the wedding that had almost become his prison, and the people who had almost destroyed his life. And with the police, his attorney, and the terrified but courageous girl beside him, he finally felt strong enough to face everything that came next. The courtyard of St. Andrews had shifted again, but this time into something unmistakably official. The sirens had faded, the immediate danger had passed, and the wedding guests no longer whispered. They stared, speechless, as the police established a controlled perimeter around the scene. What had once been a picturesque backdrop for wedding photos was now lined with yellow tape and uniformed officers cataloging evidence, gathering statements, and escorting people into designated areas. Ethan remained close to Harper, keeping a firm, protective arm around her as the lead detective approached with a gentleness rarely seen in the middle of a high-stakes investigation. She knelt down so her eyes were level with Harper's, softening her expression in a way that said she knew this child had endured far more than any 12-year-old should. Sweetheart, the detective began, her voice calm. I'm Detective Ramos. You did something very brave today. Because of you, we were going to stop some very dangerous people. Harper's shoulders shook, but she nodded, gripping Ethan's sleeve as though it were the only stable thing she had left. Do I have to go with him? She whispered, glancing fearfully toward the police cruiser where the hooded man had been locked up. No, Ramos assured her immediately. He won't come near you again. But I am going to make sure you re-protected. You re an important witness now, and we take that seriously. Harper blinked. Important? Yes, Ramos said gently. What you heard, what you saw, it matters. It helps us understand the whole picture. And it helps us protect Mr. Donovan too. Harper lowered her gaze. Nobody ever said I mattered before. Ethan felt something in his chest tighten painfully. He leaned in. You matter to me, he said softly, and you saved my life today. Harper tried to smile, but the weight of everything was still too heavy. Ramos stood, signaling to two uniformed officers nearby. We reinitiating temporary protective custody, she said. She'll be taken to a safe location with trained officers until we meet with Child Protective Services and our legal team. She'll have a guardian advocate with her at all times. Harper tensed. Do I have to leave him? She whispered to Ramos, then looked up at Ethan, fear flooding her expression. I don't want to be alone. Ethan shook his head immediately. You won't be, he promised. Wherever they take you, I'll follow. I'm not leaving you. Ramos glanced at Ethan. Her look was professional yet compassionate. We can arrange for him to accompany her to the station, as long as he doesn't interfere with the investigation. I would never, Ethan replied. Ramos nodded. Then she won't be alone. Harper finally relaxed a little, her shoulders dropping as though a massive weight had been lifted. But the moment of relief didn't last long. Shouting erupted near the church steps, and the crowd turned to see Rebecca in full panic. She was pacing in frantic circles, clutching the fabric of her dress, shaking her head wildly as her perfect bridal composure disintegrated beyond recognition. You can't do this! Rebecca screamed at an officer who tried guiding her aside. I'm the victim here.
I'm the one whose wedding was ruined. This is harassment.
She lunged toward Ethan again, but another officer stepped between them. Ma'am, the officer warned, you need to calm down. Calm down. Rebecca shrieked, her voice hitting a pitch that quivered through the courtyard. My entire future is falling apart because of a street rat and a man who refuses to listen to reason. Guests gasped. Officers stiffened. Ethan didn't move. Salazar hurried to her side, tugging on her arm. Rebecca, he hissed quietly, stop talking.
No!
She yelled, snatching her arm away. None of this is my fault. They're reframing me. This girl is framing me. Ramos stepped forward. Ma'am, we have documented evidence, recorded calls, verified communication logs. Those were taken out of context. Rebecca shouted, this is political. This is personal. I'm being targeted. Ethan watched her spiral with a numbness he couldn't fully describe. There was no remorse in her voice, no guilt, no shame, just desperation and entitlement burning through her like wildfire. Salazar, realizing the walls were closing in, switched tactics. He straightened his jacket, wiped his palms on his slacks, and approached Detective Ramos with a thin, polished smile. Detective, perhaps we can discuss this privately, he said in a low voice. I'm sure we can negotiate something reasonable. Ramos stared at him. Are you attempting to offer me a deal during an active investigation? Not a deal, Salazar said quickly, backtracking. Just an understanding. Ramos tilted her head. Place your hands behind your back. Salazar froze. What? You under arrest for attempted coercion of a police officer, Ramos said, signaling another officer forward. And you'll also be held for questioning related to conspiracy, fraud, and endangerment of a minor. The color drained from Salazar's face. This is a mistake. This is all a misunderstanding. I want my lawyer. You are a lawyer, an officer remarked dryly. But the cuffs locked around his wrists anyway. Rebecca stared in horror as Salazar was escorted toward a cruiser.
You can't take him,
she cried.
He's our attorney.
He knows how to fix this. Fix what? Ethan asked quietly. Rebecca turned toward Hitching.
Everything.
He was supposed to make everything work. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth was unraveling in public now, and the spotlight that once adored Rebecca was revealing every crack in her mask. Then came the sound Ethan dreaded most. The cane tapping against pavement. The slow, heavy footsteps. He knew them before he turned. Donovan Sart pushed through the crowd again, his jaw set in a bone-deep scowl as officers blocked his path. He held himself with the air of someone who believed rules did not apply to him, someone who believed authority bent around him, rather than the other way around. You don't have anything on me, Donovan Sart said to Ramos. You have hearsay and a scared child. Harper's grip tightened on Ethan's hand. Ethan finally stood to his full height, placing himself between his father and the little girl. You participated in all of this, Ethan said. You worked with them. Donovan Sarter's expression shifted into something darker, colder. This is business. This is betrayal, Ethan shot back. You lied to me. You tried to strip me of everything that mattered. And on top of that, you wanted to use this child to keep me quiet. Harper stepped back behind Ethan. Donovan Sart didn't even look at her, just dismissed her entirely, as though she were an obstacle instead of a human being. Ramos stepped forward again. Meh. Donovan, you are being detained for questioning. Donovan Sartor stiffened. Detained? You don't have the authority. I do, Ramos replied calmly, and we will exercise it. Officers flanked him. Donovan Sarr considered resisting, but Ethan saw the brief flicker of calculation in his father's eyes. He wanted to fight, but he also knew that public resistance would only incriminate him further. So he raised his chin and allowed the officers to escort him away, though every stiff movement radiated indignation. Ethan exhaled deeply. The man he once called father had never looked smaller. Harper looked up at him, her voice tiny. Did I do something wrong? Ethan knelt beside her again. No, he said, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. You did everything right. And because of you, they can't hurt anyone else. Her lip trembled. Are they going to hurt you? Not anymore, Ethan said. You made sure of that. Ramos stepped closer. We need to take her to a safe house now. Ethan, you can ride in the transport car behind her, but only if you agree to stay with an officer present. Ethan nodded. I'm going with her. Ramos smiled. I knew you would. As the officers prepared to escort Harper to the vehicle, she looked back at Ethan with wide, fearful eyes. You won't leave, right? Never, Ethan said. You're safe now. And for the first time in hours, maybe in years, he meant every word with absolute certainty. The courtyard of St. Andrews had fully transformed now. Whatever remained of the wedding, the flowers, the silk ribbons, the immaculate decorations felt like relics of an alternate universe that had collapsed only moments earlier. Officers moved with quiet efficiency, escorting witnesses, gathering evidence, interviewing guests, speaking into radios. The earlier chaos had solidified into something heavy, structured, undeniable. Even the guests who hadn't yet left stood in stunned clusters, whispering carefully as if afraid any louder noise might shatter what little sense remained in the air. Ethan stood in the center of all of it, watching the scene with a strange blend of numbness and razor-cut clarity. He felt the weight of betrayal anchored deep in his chest, his father's voice in the recording, the man in the hood sent to silence a child, Rebecca's venom, Salazar's lies, the manipulation layered so meticulously around him. Each piece of it pressed down like invisible hands, trying to crush him into the marble beneath his shoes. But every time he wavered, every time his breath shortened, he felt the small hand wrapped around his own. Harper, trembling, exhausted, eyes reddened from tears, but still gripping him like he was the only safe place left in the world. Detective Ramos approached with 2 officers. They're ready to move, she said gently. We will transport Harper to the station first. You will be in the vehicle behind her. After that, we will arrange protective custody until we figure out long-term placement. Harper stiffened. Long-term? Her voice cracked. Do I have to go away? Ramos softened her tone. Just for safety, we want to keep you protected. But you're not alone. Harper's eyes shot up to Ethan, immediately filled with rising panic. You'll come, right? You promised. Ethan crouched to eye level, placing both hands on her shoulders. I'm not leaving you, he said, steady and sure. Not now, not later. I'm with you through everything. Harper stared at him for a long second. Then slowly, cautiously, she nodded. The officers guided them toward the police vehicles parked near the street. The once grand entrance of the church felt foreign now, tainted. As Ethan and Harper walked, the crowd parted instinctively. Some guests looked ashamed, some guilty, some simply stunned. A few whispered things like, poor kid, Ethan doesn't deserve this, that family is ruined, but he barely registered the noise. His focus was on Harper, keeping her close, keeping her safe. The hooded man, still in the back of the cruiser, locked eyes with them as they passed. Harper froze, her breath faltering, her hand crushing Ethan's. The man didn't speak, but the coldness in his stare was enough to make Harper tremble violently. Ethan stepped in front of her, blocking her view entirely, his own eyes narrowing into something uncharacteristically fierce. Ramos signaled the officer handling the suspect. Cover the rear windows. The officer quickly placed a reflective shield over the glass. Harper exhaled shakily once the man was out of sight. Thank you, Ethan murmured to Ramos. She gave him a nod. He won't get near her again. Not on my watch. Harper clung to Ethan's arm as they approached the first police sub. An officer opened the door and kneeled down. Hey, kiddo, he said softly, you will ride with me. I'll be right here the whole time. No one can touch you. Harper looked up at Ethan again, fear pooling in her eyes. Ethan brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. I'm right behind you, he said, and we will talk the entire drive. I'll follow whoever you follow. Her lip trembled, but she nodded. The officer helped her climb in, buckled her seat belt, and closed the door gently. Harper pressed her hand to the glass immediately, eyes locked on Ethan's. Ethan pressed his hand against the window in the same spot. For a moment, despite the flashing lights and the ruined wedding behind them, they were just two people trying desperately not to lose each other in the confusion. Ramos approached Ethan as he watched the car. You okay? He almost laughed at the question. Honestly, I don't know what I am. She nodded, not expecting more. You'll all need to give a statement once we arrive. It'll take time. And it's going to be rough. I know, and you'll probably be questioned again later. Legal teams, child services, internal affairs. The whole machine. I know, he repeated quietly. And you sure you want Harper with you through this? Ethan looked back at the SUV where Harper sat watching him, her face small and frightened in the tinted window. Yes, he said. More sure than anything else today. Ramos studied him for a moment, then softened. She trusts you, that matters, you know. Kids like her don't trust easily. She saved my life, Ethan replied. The least I can do is stay close to hers. Ramos gave a slow nod, then let's move. Ethan walked toward the second vehicle, his assigned car. A police officer opened the back door for him. As Ethan climbed inside, he felt the weight of everything settle onto his shoulders again. Exhaustion seeped into him, heavy and raw. His entire world had cracked open in a matter of hours. His father, his own flesh and blood, had tried to manipulate him, use him, betray him. Rebecca had been willing to destroy his name. Salazar had woven the legal noose, and someone had been hired to silence a child. For a moment, in the quiet of the police cruiser, Ethan let his head fall back against the seat, eyes drifting shut. The betrayal cut deeper than he'd expected. There had always been distance between him and his father, but he never imagined this level of cruelty. His mind replayed the recording, every syllable of his father's voice dripping with cold precision. The realization settled like a bruise. His father never saw him as a son, only as an asset. But then Ethan opened his eyes and looked forward. The SUV holding Harper began to pull away, and without hesitation, his driver started the engine to follow. Harper's small silhouette twisted in her seat, peering through the rear window to make sure Ethan was still there. When she saw him behind her, she lifted a shaky hand. Ethan lifted his own. No words, just a promise. As the convoy pulled away from the ruined wedding, escorted by flashing blue lights, Ethan felt something unfamiliar rise inside him, not hope exactly, but purpose. A purpose that had nothing to do with his father, or power, or money. A purpose shaped by the bruised, frightened girl in the car ahead. He didn't know what came next, the investigations, the lawsuits, the media storm, the fallout of confronting his father's sins, the unraveling of everything he thought he knew. But he knew one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever storm came next, he wasn't facing it alone. Not anymore. And neither was Harper. The drive to the station felt longer than it really was, not because of traffic or distance, but because of the heaviness that hung in the air. Ethan stared through the window of the police cruiser, watching the city blur by in streaks of gray and gold as the afternoon sun dipped lower. His reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar, tired eyes, jaw tense, shoulders weighted with the collapse of everything he thought he knew. Behind the cruiser ahead, he could see the faint outline of Harper's head pressed against the tinted window. Even from a distance, he could sense her fear and exhaustion. She had been living in survival mode for who knew how long, and in a single day. She had stepped into a world even adults struggled to navigate: legal systems, threats, corruption, betrayal. She shouldn't have had to carry any of it. And yet she had carried him through it too. When they arrived at the station, officers guided both vehicles into a secured lot. Ethan stepped out as soon as his door opened. Harper was already exiting the SUV ahead, escorted by Officer Daniels, the gentle one with kind eyes who had spoken to her like a big brother. The moment Harper saw Ethan, she broke away from Daniels and ran straight to him. Ethan crouched just in time for her to wrap her arms around his neck. He held her tightly, steadying her trembling body. "You came," she whispered, breath shuddering against his shoulder. "I promised," Ethan said softly. "I always will." Officer Daniels approached with a cautious smile. "She's going to be assigned a guardian advocate and placed in a secure environment for the next few days. Cease is handling placement. It might take time." Harper stiffened instantly, pulling back just enough look at Ethan with wide, terrified eyes. Do I have to leave you? Before Ethan could answer, Ramos stepped forward. That depends. But there is a possibility if Ethan is willing. Harper turned to Ramos. A possibility for what? Ramos folded her arms, assessing Ethan with a mixture of professionalism and something almost like hope. State law allows for temporary protective placement with a trusted civilian if the child requests it, and if the adult is deemed responsible. It's rare, and it requires approval from a judge, but given the nature of the threat, the seriousness of the situation, and the fact that you risked your safety to protect her, it's an option. Harper's eyes filled with tears, hopeful ones this time. Ethan felt a pressure build in his chest, a mix of emotions so strong it took him a moment to answer. I want to, he said quietly, if she wants to. Harper nodded instantly, gripping his sleeve like she feared losing him again. I don't want to go anywhere else. Ramos gave a small, approving nod. Then let's start the paperwork. But Ethan, this won't be easy. Protective custody means responsibility. It means social workers checking in, security protocols, limited travel, and a strict routine. Ethan didn't hesitate. Whatever it takes. They were escorted inside past officers, detectives buzzing phones, and the rhythmic hum of printers. Harper stayed glued to Ethan's side, her small hand wrapped around his 2 fingers. They were brought into a private interview room, first neutral, quiet, with soft lighting and a table that looked less intimidating than the ones in typical interrogation chambers. A woman in her 50s entered the room, social worker Angela Monroe. Her expression was gentle, her posture relaxed, and her voice warm in a way that soothed even Ethan. Harper, she said softly, pulling up a chair next to her instead of across from her, I'm here to help you. You're safe now. You did something incredibly brave today. Harper lowered her gaze. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. I know, Angela said. But because of you, a lot of people won't get hurt. The interview began. Ethan stayed with Harper the entire time, answering when appropriate, offering reassurance when Harper struggled. She explained everything she'd overheard, every threat, every conversation, every fear she'd carried alone. Ethan watched her with a strange mix of awe and heartbreak. She was so young, yet she had faced something that would break grown men. When the interview ended, Angela placed a stack of papers on the table and looked at Ethan. If we proceed with temporary placement, it will begin tonight. But I need to ask you honestly, are you prepared for what this means? Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. My entire life just burned down today. My father is involved in a criminal investigation. My ex-fiancée tried to take everything from me. I almost got trapped in a marriage that would have destroyed me, and the only person who protected me was her. He nodded toward Harper. So yes, I'm prepared. Angela smiled gently. Then let's make it official. Harper let out a breath she'd been holding for hours, leaning into Ethan's side as though finally beginning to believe she was safe. Later that evening, after signing the documents and completing every required formality, Ethan stepped outside the station with Harper. The night air was cool, the sky tinted with the fading shades of dusk. Police cars idled nearby, officers exchanging shifts, but the intensity of the earlier chaos had quieted. Harper looked up at Ethan. Where do we go now? Ethan took a slow breath. It was the first time he'd had to think about the future since the collapse of his life only hours earlier. He didn't have the answers yet. His home could be compromised. His father might try something else. The media would swarm him. Everything needed be rebuilt from the foundation outward. But when he looked down at Harper, the answer came easily. To somewhere safe, he said. Somewhere that's ours for now. Somewhere no one can hurt you. She nodded, trusting him completely. And what about you? She whispered. You look sad. Ethan crouched in front of her, brushing her hair gently behind her ear. I lost a lot today, he admitted. Family. Trust. A part of my past I thought was solid. Harper frowned. Because of them. Yes, he said, because of them. But Harper hesitated before continuing. You didn't lose everything. He tilted his head. What do you mean? You still have your kindness, she said simply. They didn't take that. Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. It had been a long time since anyone had reminded him something good remained inside him at all. And Harper added shyly, you have me now, if you want. Ethan's breath caught. He put his hand on her shoulder. I do want, he said quietly. More than you know. For the first time that day, Harper smiled, a small, fragile smile, but a real one. As they walked toward the escorted sub waiting for them, Ethan glanced back once at the police station. Inside those walls, his old life was unraveling. Court cases, testimonies, investigations, consequences. His future would be tangled in them for months, maybe years. But beside him walked a child who had saved him, and he realized something profound. Sometimes the family you lose makes space for the family you were meant to find. As the SUV door closed behind them and the engine rumbled to life, Ethan rested his hand over Harper's. The road ahead was uncertain, dangerous, complicated, but for the first time all day, he felt a flicker of hope. A new beginning. Not just for him, but for them both. The story of Ethan and Harper carries a powerful lesson that stretches far beyond the unraveling of a corrupted wedding day. At its core, this is a story about perception, how easily it can be manipulated, how quickly trust can be twisted, and how dangerous it becomes when people use influence, wealth, or social power to distort the truth. Ethan lived most of his life surrounded by privilege, believing that the people closest to him, his father, his fiancée, his attorney, had his best interests at heart. He assumed loyalty was a certainty and that betrayal was something that only happened to others. But the truth is that danger often comes disguised in familiar shapes. Sometimes it wears a suit. Sometimes it wears a wedding dress. Sometimes it speaks softly, calls itself family, and convinces you it's protecting you while it slowly sharpens the knife. Ethan learned that trust is not a gift, it's a responsibility that must be earned, not inherited. And those who betray it reveal more about themselves than the people they attempt to destroy. At the same time, the story flips the expectations of who we allow ourselves to believe. Harper, a young homeless girl with nothing to her name but courage, was the only one who dared to tell Ethan the truth. She had no social influence, no family legacy, no money, and no status. Yet she possessed what the others lacked: integrity. The story demonstrates a profound truth: wisdom and moral clarity do not belong exclusively to those with power or privilege. Sometimes the most truthful voices come from the margins, from those the world overlooks, and from those who have survived realities others never face. Harper had seen cruelty without filters. She had no reason to lie, and no benefit to gain by speaking up. She warned Ethan not because she was obligated to, but because she recognized in him the goodness that his own family had tried to exploit. Her bravery teaches us that doing the right thing often demands great risk, and that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest moral weight. Another lesson woven through the story is the danger of silence in the face of wrongdoing. Ethan's father and Rebecca built their scheme on the assumption that no one would speak up. They relied on secrecy, shame, and fear. They counted on Ethan's blind loyalty and Harper's vulnerability. Their entire plan depended on people staying quiet. But truth has a way of rising, especially when someone chooses courage over fear. The collapse of their scheme illustrates that injustice thrives only when it goes unchallenged. Ethan breaking away from the chains of manipulation is a reminder that it is never too late to choose integrity over expectation. In exposing the truth, he not only saves himself, but creates a path for justice that could prevent others from suffering the same fate. The lesson is clear: confronting wrongdoing is painful, risky, and messy, but necessary. Silence allows corruption to deepen its roots. Speaking up uproots it. Perhaps the deepest emotional lesson in the story is about family: what defines it, what breaks it, and what rebuilds it. Ethan's biological family failed him in the most devastating ways. His father saw him as a pawn, not a son. Rebecca saw him as a tool, not a partner. He stood on the brink of losing everything because the people he believed would protect him were the ones sharpening the blade. Yet in the same moment he lost them. He found Harper, someone with no blood relation to him, no past loyalty, yet more genuine than anyone in his world. Their bond is not born from obligation but from shared truth, shared danger, and shared humanity. The story teaches that family is not defined by blood or last names. It is defined by action, loyalty, compassion, and courage. Sometimes the family we choose is more real and more healing than the one we are born into. Harper teaching Ethan kindness, and Ethan offering Harper safety, becomes a reminder that broken people can build something whole together. Finally, the story shows that healing begins with choosing a different path. Ethan could have collapsed under the weight of betrayal. He could have allowed bitterness to harden him, or allowed fear to silence him. He could have walked away from Harper, claiming he had too much to handle. Instead, he chose responsibility. He chose protection. He chose to rebuild not with money or influence, but with humanity. And Harper, in turn, found something she'd never had: someone who saw her as worthy, not invisible. Their journey forward becomes a symbol of hope, that even in the aftermath of manipulation, corruption, and danger, people can create something meaningful. They can rebuild trust, rebuild identity, and rebuild home. The most important lesson of all is that redemption begins the moment you decide to protect what is good even when everything around you has fallen apart. In the end, the story is not just about exposing a conspiracy. It is about reclaiming agency, choosing courage over comfort, and recognizing that sometimes the people we expect to hurt us don't, and the people we expect to protect us do. It is a reminder that integrity is more powerful than influence, that truth can survive even the strongest attempts to bury it, and that the most unexpected bonds can become the most transformative ones. Ethan and Harper's story teaches us that even when life collapses, there is always a way back so long as you choose courage, choose honesty, and choose each other. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss upcoming videos. If you have any suggestions or questions, feel free to leave a comment below. I'd really love to hear your feedback. Thank you for watching until the end.